CMO Summit Part 2 at Vivatech. Thank you for joining us. There are still some seats available here and there. Feel free to go wherever you want. So, the next CMO. I will just briefly present with my words what I understood of what Yann is going to share to you. CMOs are entering a new operating system. CMO is almost becoming a tech leader, actually. As agents reshape marketing education, leadership shifts toward technology-driven decisions that redefine brand strategy and business impact. That's all of it. Brand strategy, business impact. Who can talk about all those critical topics better than me? Yann Caloghiris, Chief Experience Officer, Left Field Labs, coming from California. Yann, on stage, avec les applaudissements, s'il vous plaît, les amis. Thank you, Yann, for being there.
Bonjour, good morning, good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me, Vivatech. So a pretty big title, the CMO of the future. What does that look like? The near future, it's moving fast. So it's not really for me to say. So we work with a lot of CMOs, and frankly, I had a lot of conversations with them, and what you'll see here is the results of what they're doing in Silicon Valley to get ahead. In this presentation, I'll take you through a little bit of how they think and what's that shaping and why that's shaping their career. I'll also give you some very practical things to do if you are CMOs or marketers to think about what to do next to get ready for 2030. And then at the very end, we've also coded a small agentic tool for the few of you who are here to start your journey as CMO. So stay till the end to get access to that. So it's not a new topic. The idea of being replaced by AI is not new. This is a cover that I have in my living room. It's from 1964, and already at the time they were terrified that a big 8-armed robot with a punch card robot at the top would take over our jobs. So it's not a new topic. But it's 2030, and LLMs are here. Yann was talking about his world models. What does that mean for the CMO? Someone who's in charge with shaping the perception of a brand, of selling to customers, of engaging. We are Left Field Labs. We're a company that helps CMOs, Silicon Valley, global leaders, mostly help them attack new markets, adopt new technologies, and really transform their business. And so I spent a lot of time with them, obviously late nights, helping them write keynotes and all sorts of things. And I regularly ask them, what are you doing to shape your future? And how is that going to transform for everybody else? Before I take you there, we're going to do a little exercise, have a little bit of fun. So I just researched this morning to see what was the most difficult créneau in public speaking in France, and I found out that this is the most difficult, the most difficult one. A white paper recently called it the sacrifice slot because the brain's oxygen is strictly reserved for digestion. It's a flawless recipe for deep sleep, and that's a quote. So I'm going to ask you all to stand up, please, if you wouldn't mind standing up for me. Thank you so much. We're going to do a little exercise, and it's kind of a little level-setting exercise. We hear so much slop on the internet about what we should listen to, what's a real market signal, what's just a business trying to drum some excitement for what they're doing. So I'm going to go through pretty quickly some big headlines, and I want you to raise your hand if this is a signal that you believe you should be taking heed to, that you should be listening, or if it's slop. If it's slop, keep your arms down. Okay? Everybody understand? Okay, let's go. First one. AI will write 95% of marketing content within 5 years. Raise your hand if you think that's slop. Oh, who had their hand raised? No one? Okay, well, let's go to the next one. Let's see. So you raise your hand if it's slop. This was slop. This was Sam Altman make that claim. It was unsubstantiated. We're still very far from that. Okay, next one. NVIDIA lost almost $600 billion in one day. Signal or slop? Raise your hand if you think this is a slop headline.
Yann, can you please tell us what slop is? So
slop
we are
is
sure.
fake, you shouldn't take heed, you shouldn't listen to it, it's just rubbish, it's just trying to build excitement? Or is it a real signal? Everybody thinks it's a signal? It is a signal. They lost those 600 billion when DeepSeek was launched. If you remember, a Chinese model cost $6 million to train. They said it was 4 million, it panned out to be 6 million, but still, transformational. With 900 million weekly users, OpenAI is winning. Slop? Slop? Raise your hand if you think it's Slop. It is Slop. Everybody who didn't have their hand raised, please sit down. It is Slop, because they might be winning the user base race, but they're certainly losing the revenue base. If you saw, there was some leaks this morning, many billions being spent. 95% of GenAI enterprise pilots produce 0 measurable returns. Is that Slop? Or is that Signal? Signal. It is. Most pilots where you use AI, they actually fail to deliver on the results that they were promised. The EU Act is just compliance theater. It's coming out in 6 weeks. Is it compliance theater? Do they understand the industry, or is it Slop? It is Slop. So everybody didn't have their hands raised up, please sit down. Okay, Air Canada's chatbot invented a refund policy and a court ruled the airline legally bound by it. Signal. And then finally, Coca-Cola ran a controversial AI ad over Christmas and another one the following year. Signal too, they've kept doing it. It's a sign that they believe that this is the future for advertising in some capacity. And then finally, the CMO role is disappearing. Slop. Exactly. Thank you very much. So everybody, you clearly all have very good BS filters, so that makes my job easier. So, okay, so let's just taking a step back and looking a bit how CMOs in Silicon Valley really look at this when they're placing bets. You know, turnover is high for CMOs, so they need to place calculated bets. So if you look at the big industrial revolutions, railways, 19th century, was 6% of US GDP. Electrification, 20th century, 6% of GDP. The AI infrastructure, 5%. But the train still lasts today. France has an amazing railroad track. It was built multiple hundreds of years ago. In the US also, roughly 30-year investment to keep it going. A data center is very different. The estimates are between 2 to 6 years. So it's more like an OpEx than a CapEx. So it doesn't live as long. But the investment is incredibly high. Also, if you look at the countries, their infrastructure for energy is set very differently, right? The US is going to have massive grid appetite, but it's a broken grid. Europe has some power, but not enough, and low compute. And then China has both, and is moving very fast with both. So when you're considering AI and whether you can place a calculated bet and move a global business marketing strategy like some of our clients do, you look at 4 key things. First thing is the cost. So right now we're in a penetration pricing phase. If you remember Uber a few years ago, they famously had this millennial lifestyle subsidy. It was really designed to get people to adopt the technology. By the time they felt they had enough adoption, they brought the prices up, and they finally had a $100 ticket from JFK to downtown New York, which is roughly 3 times what a yellow cab was. But the user base was set. This is happening now in AI, right? We're all roughly paying 30% of what we should be, the true cost. So it's a heavily subsidized piece of technology. Okay, then there's a paradox also that's happening. C'est un peu chiant ce truc. So Jefferson, we're going back to the train era, noticed a very strange principle in technology adoption. The more the railroads became efficient as using coal, the more consumption went up. And that paradox is also true for AI. As you can see on the left, the prices are going down for inference, but the enterprise budget is going up. And so it's really insatiable as a piece of technology. The more you spend, the more you're required to spend. 3, the platform. So you've probably heard there's a lot of platforms serving marketers and organizations right now who are using AI, and it's baked in, agentic tools, services, etc. But most of them are concerned about AI and you can see it in the marketplace, right? Because their prices are dropping even though their revenues are high. And that's because if you have an AI tool set, do you really need a seat-based model on top of it with users using an application when AI can just look at the database? So the value of these tech companies is in flux. And you'll see all of them in 12 months rebranded themselves, transformed themselves, and try to give you a new value proposition. So the observation is that it's frankly an unstable industry for the gatekeepers to the agentic enterprise, the AI enterprise. And then 4, specifically for this group, Europe. So Europe has had a fascinating precedent set in the legal framework of AI that is reshaping AI. And I mentioned it in the Signal or Slop. It was the Air Canada precedent. And so the anecdote goes that someone asked for a special treatment, a special deal. The chatbot said, yes, you have that deal. And obviously the airline didn't want to give them the special deal, took them to court and won. And the judge ruling said, if your chatbot says something, you say something. And so in 6 weeks from today, the new rules will be setting in place. The AI Act. What's fascinating with it is that there's going to be a tremendous amount of fines for misuse. They're talking about 35 million euros minimum and 7% of total annual turnover, whichever one is highest. So for a company like Google, misuse could mean $21 billion of revenue. So it's a pretty big deal. And so why am I up here telling you to think about AI as marketers, as CMO, when I've just told you it's heavily subsidized, so the prices are going to shoot up. It's insatiable. The more you spend, the more it'll ask you to spend. It's unstable. There's no clear path. And finally, it's going to be very heavily regulated in the EU. Well, there's a couple reasons. One is most of the CMOs we work with have a global perspective, and so they understand that all the markets work differently. If you look at the US, it's all about speed. There's a gold rush for AI right now. In China, it's about scale. It's more measured, it's state-aligned, but it's about scale. In Europe, it's a trust exercise. But these 3 things work together. America is pulling the technology forward. China is kind of like creating a precedent for how we should build infrastructure if we want to scale to the far reaches of the European Union. And then Europe is setting precedent with laws. And so all 3 of them have value. And so as CMOs, most of them see AI as a depreciating tool, something that's going to go up in cost, that's risky, that's challenging. But at the same time, they see it as essential to protecting the one asset that they're accountable for, and that ultimately they're accountable for it appreciating, which is the brand. So I'm going to do a quickly run from next year to 2030. You're a CMO. What should you be doing with AI to get ready? In what order? So this is what I've learned. The first one is that 95% of GenAI pilots return nothing. That's as of today, right? We've seen that. It's an MIT paper. It's very well regarded. But if you look at the 5% who are successful, it's pretty impressive what they can deliver on. But they had 3 key criteria. 1, an incredibly tight scope. Not a macro, big picture, we're going to transform our business. A very thin slice of their organization, tightly scoped. 2, it was domain specific. It might be customer service, it might be a campaign, very narrow, very specific. And 3, it was built with partners. So don't expect your IT team to fully deploy something and make it successful. Work in partnership with domain experts. One example is a piece of work we did with Google. So this was Google's first GenAI campaign. It's for Google Pixel. It's a campaign where AI agents, together with people on X and social media, co-created the campaign. In one day, 300 campaigns were customized per region, and it was by far their most successful Pixel launch on social media. So co-created, very narrow, very specific, short time frame, test, iterate, learn. So that's the foundation. The first step really is to build a foundation. You want to deploy a secure system that you feel you can get your arms around. Maybe it's on-prem, You know, it's not using cloud-based, so you can manage the tokens. It doesn't have to be a flashy campaign. Maybe it's something to do with data analytics, but it's something small, contained, that you can build, you can learn on today, now. Okay, it's 2028. The years are moving. In 2028, 75% of marketers are using AI today already. You know, you're probably all using chatbots, etc., to come up with terminology. Maybe some of the advanced ones are using agents to automate certain tasks. But what's going to change is that we're going to move from a seat-based model, where all marketers have access to a platform and a software and a set of tools, to something that's a lot more about inference. So it's a much more pay-as-you-go approach. And so that's going to change the model. So we helped Salesforce launch Agentforce, develop that value proposition, demonstrate how it transforms in business and how it's going to transform how we think about using marketing and these technologies in a space. And really what was interesting, what we learned about it, is that the benefits for the organization are not always where you expect. It might be the IT team that finds a way to close a security threat, or it might be the marketing team that finds an automation tool that makes their customer service relationship so much better. So the second part of it is, once you have that foundation and you have a confidence level, it's built a translation tool. How do I use AI to do something consistently that I can track and measure, and that builds a key KPI throughout the year? And so it might be connecting agents to data. It might be accessing pockets of data that you can't use in your everyday marketing. AI can translate COBOL, for example, which is a piece of code that a lot of banking systems use, that were impossible to collect data from, very difficult. But now AI can allow you to translate that data. So brand new data is emerging about customers who've been with the bank for 20 years, and you know what they've done through that whole career. So real value. Okay, it's 2029, we're getting closer. So in 2029, we know that it's a fairly, Gartner's predicting that, but I think the confidence is fairly high based on what's happening at the moment in the adoption curve, that service issues are going to be mostly responded to by AI. So complaints, they're already happening, they're already doing that, but agents will do more than just speak to you. Taking my water away, so I better not get thirsty. Yeah, they're already doing some of that. They're already responding to customer complaints. The next step is agents can perform tasks on your behalf. So they might send something to the supply chain and say, reduce the stock on this, quick. And they might do that overnight. Or increase stock, we're seeing more interest. Or they might change the pricing model. You saw probably FIFA and their pricing for the World Cup and how it's fluctuating based on demand. So all this can be looped together, and you can create something that feels a lot more alive and better serving your business. So we built an example for that for Qualcomm. It's a robot, it edits videos on the fly, it's an ambassador, it's doing all this on the edge. And so one of the big demonstrators of this kind of technology is that you can build something that is private, closed loop, but that behaves as a brand ambassador and provides real change. So the third layer up is orchestration, right? We started with a closed space that you can trust. Then we translated it, meaning that we now have consistent revenue or benefit over time. The next one is orchestrating. You're now potentially replacing a moment where humans are in the loop very frequently to entrusting an agent to do something specific and doing it on its own. Could be a legal agent talking to a finance agent, talking to a supply agent to manage stock, for example. It's 2030. So where will the bleeding edge firms be? Well, we know by that point that supply chain solutions are going to be completely solved. The big bets that they're making from a hardware perspective, the millions of dollars to create, you know, the dark factories that are completely automated and robotic, all agentic. And so the human, particularly the CMO, moves from an author and a trigger to more of someone who orchestrates something. And that's really the big interesting change. Some companies will be fully agentic. I would say it's the closest that we've worked on. It's a company called MyCOI. It's virtually completely AI. It's a company that works for insurance compliance. So think large organizations that have multiple insurances that rely on these insurance to keep their work site safe, their employees safe. Well, it used to be very manual. You read all the contracts, you make sure that you're still, compliant. This whole system is AI automated now with multiple agents, translating documents, sending messages, communicating with customers, etc. So it's almost a virtual company. And so that's really the last piece. It's increasingly parts of the organization will be autonomous. And you will set the direction, the North Star, track, measure, look at the data, but they will start to do things on their own and behave on their own. Now the models need to catch up, obviously. It probably won't be the models we have today. There's going to be a change of guards, we're probably all sure. But the CMO role, we think, is not going to be gone. It's just, it'll be probably one of the first to evolve in the organization, particularly in large corporate groups. And some of the shifts we're going to see, the traditional one was, next week is the Cannes Lions. A lot of CMOs would get wooed by the media company with champagne and rosé and buy some ad space from me. That's going to happen less because the ad space will also be a moving target. So agents will buy spaces, might pull out of a certain medium based on what's happening on the market. So they will design the infrastructure and build the relationships to allow their agents to perform on their behalf. 2, they'll become brand stewards. A piece that's very, very difficult to automate. Real brand and the affinity we have for it, how we feel about it, is personal, it's empathetic, it's deeply human, and it's a bit intangible. Data alone can't get you there. So they're going to start to shape signals, like we had the signals in Slop, that make people feel an affinity for the brand. 3, there probably still will be campaigns, seasonal campaigns, new product launches, etc. But it'll be less of your time and energy spent on those campaigns and more on orchestrating the brand as a whole. Where is it going? Am I reaching the people that need to be reached? Are the agents doing a job at customizing where it needs to be customized versus having more of a macro perspective when there's more people that need to be hit? And so if brand in 2010 lived in things like the 30-second TV spot, the brand pages, the out-of-home, the channels that you bought, by 2030, it'll also be in the places that customers' agents recommend. We all, I think, at some point went to Gemini or ChatGPT and said, oh, which one's the best dishwasher, or what's a great film to watch on the plane? It's making a decision on our behalf, and we're circumventing all the traditional touch points that a marketer had. It'll be things also where an agent is selling to another agent so that that agent makes the recommendation to the end customer. So you'll have a completely different group of end users to appeal to who will be completely technology-based, completely data-based. One interesting thing is, so 2010 was all about where the promises were made. You'd use, for example, in the US, the Super Bowl, and you'd make a promise about what you'd do for the next 12 months. Whereas now, more of the intent and the effort will be put on the places where those promises are delivered, where people can actually feel those promises happening for real. And so marketers, we start at the bottom, maybe a product manager or something like that, and you climb the ladder and one day you become a CMO. That's probably going to change fundamentally, and it'll look something more like this, like a lattice. And what I mean by that is there's going to be some zigzagging. You're going to have to understand a little bit more about technology and IT. You're going to have to understand a little bit more about the cost of inference being the cost to tokenize an initiative. So that's going to change how you think as a marketer and less about the traditional ladder. So you may be going from department to department. So the old CMO bought media, the new CMO is negotiating compute. The old CMO designed for humans, the new one is creating signals for humans and machines, and they're different and they demand different things. Would own campaigns, but now is orchestrating agents that are generating campaigns. Would be managing share of voice, but now is also looking at the cost to resolve that income. And finally, used to just report to the CMO And actually, a lot of them are becoming CEOs today. But now they're speaking the language of the CFO, the CIO, the CTO. So they're speaking many more languages than they used to. Okay, so it's Monday morning. Hopefully some of this has landed. And what should be the 3 things to consider doing as marketers, as leaders? The first one is audit. And by that, I don't mean go to your IT team and say, where should we audit? Talk to your people. How are they using it? Maybe get them a little bit drunk, so that they tell you the truth about how they're actually using it. And get those really little nuggets. I'm asking you to write text, or actually I'm collecting data through it, or I'm automating my calendar. Find those things, learn. 2, engineer. Try and work with outside partners, learn and see out of the things that you learned, what can I start to build a roadmap? What can I start to build a prototype on? 3, start to play with orchestration. The time is now if you want to get ahead, right? It's heavily subsidized. We're not paying the full price. Some of these companies are going to get big IPOs, and you can bet your socks that the price will go up. So now is the time to play, because you're being sponsored to play with it. And so, but what I think will always stay the same will be chasing the white space. Where should your brand go and why? What does it mean to people? How do you build a community around it? That is difficult, but it's also the wonderful bit, I think, of being a marketer, because it's the place where you truly get to connect with people and the things that matter to them on a deeper level. So I believe truly that this will be the big unlock for this new technology revolution. And so before we go, we built this little tool here for you. It's designed for marketers. It's following all of the latest EU regulation. So if you scan the QR code, you can talk to one of our agents. You can talk very freely. You can use the microphone or type in, have a conversation about a challenge, something you're trying to solve. And then there'll be a multi-agent system doing research, connecting to APIs, looking at competitor data, and then trying to surface for you what might be a white space that could help you develop a new strategy or a new opportunity for your business. It's using EU law, so it will take a little bit longer because we're following all the rules. But if you leave the browser page open and come back in a few minutes, you'll see the results in there. So that's it. Thank you so much for your time.
No, guys. I want a noise that people will hear from the other part of Vivatech. I want some noise for Yann.
Merci.
Allez.
Merci.
Yann Caloghiris, super. Great talk, super. Parfait, Yann. Merci pour tout. You understood. CMOs are entering a new operating system. Who